know you're just about ready to ask your questions, but before you get to do that, I get to ask one. And only one of each panelist. So my question for you, Ms. Littlefield from OPIC, is we have a lot of small business representatives in the room, and you have mentioned that there are fees associated with your services, and what I'd like to know is do you have special considerations for small firms that want to apply for either your grant, well, actually you have grants too, but do you not have grants, okay, financing and insurance products?
Our fees and services are charged on a sliding scale. So in some cases, we have preferential treatment for those organizations that are having highly developmental impact, or smaller, or NGOs. We work a lot with NGOs or diaspora-owned businesses. So that can be the case, yes. But our number of objectives, of course, is to be financially self-sustaining. So we do have to charge those kind of fees and commissions that are justified by the business that we're taking. So I'll leave it there and come back to other questions.
Okay.
Sorry, you're clearly on this side.
Okay, can you hear now? Can you hear me clearly on that side? Okay, so perhaps we'll have. Oh, okay. Well, she'll have another chance to. She heard your question and mine, and so she will respond again in the overall Q&A. Okay, now I'm going to ask the question of our representative from the Trade Development Agency. You said that you do focus on the infrastructure sector and also increasingly on reverse trade missions. So those are very interesting sectors for most of the businesses represented here. And my question for you is, what are among your mechanisms for letting us know that the reverse missions are here and that there are opportunities to be involved in some infrastructure projects this year?
Thank you very much. And yes, getting the word out is extremely important. So as a matter of fact, our website, www.ustda.gov, has an event section. We also work with the Department of Commerce and with their website and exports.gov to get the word out. But the other thing that USTDA has done is it has developed something called Making Global Local. And what we're doing is we're working with state and local governmental development agencies and partnering with them, and they are getting our word out as well. So in every state, or states that are our partners, they are carrying the information with respect to where you can find these reverse trade missions. And one important factor is they are across the country. And that's one of the things we're focusing on. It's not just Washington, D.C., it is across the country that we are bringing these delegations.
Thank you. And speaking of promotion, my question for Mike Nasserman from the Department of Commerce is the Foreign Commercial Service is a very important mechanism for us, particularly in Africa, and so we'd like to ask you where we have FCS representatives and how you leverage them in your overall promotion campaign for doing business in Africa.
Sure.
So we have representatives in the region. We take a regional approach. We have representatives in South Africa, in Nigeria, and in Kenya. But what I think is critical, and a representative in Ghana as well. What's critical is that we have State Department partnership hosts. And so when we don't have commercial service, we work with our State Department colleagues, as well as our USAID trade hubs. And as we're looking to leverage folks from the State Department, working very closely with ambassadors on the ground in the region, again, working with them to bring international buyers here. But what I think we're also doing is leveraging private sector companies who have worked with the commercial service, as well as Exxon, TE, and OPIC to help get the word out about our services. I mean, one of the issues I think we have in government is that we don't necessarily have budgets for marketing. So we really rely on our stakeholders in the private sector to help get the word out about the services that we have and also about the opportunities in the region. But our commercial service folks out there are the ones who are doing the market assessments and who also have these gold key services to actually link buyers, actually link the sellers of goods and services with vetted buyers. But again, for us, it's really taking a whole government regional approach.
Okay, my last question, and I'm going to cheat a little bit and sneak in two questions to Benjamin Todd from the Export Import Bank. I'm going to do that because was on that advisory board for a number of years, and there are two things I want to bring to everybody's attention. One is for you to comment on the difference between your financing and that of the Small Business Administration in terms of returns. And the second, really, if you can address this quickly, is how can small firms use some of your insurance products in interesting ways to finance exports, to get the local banks here to accept the insurance instead of financing.
Thank you. Well, to start with the first question, how does our financing differ from SBA's financing? One of the products that we have to help U.S. businesses is working capital loan guarantees. If a U.S. business is looking at a large export order, and they don't have the working capital necessary, we can provide financing to that business, whether they're large or small. Our rates are somewhat similar to SBA. We don't have the caps that SBA does, and SBA can kind of fill in sometimes on the defense side of the business where Exim Bank cannot. We also have a wide range of programs on the what I call post-export financing, where we can finance overseas businesses or governments and state-owned enterprises with their purchases of U.S. goods and services. Again, we have no caps on that. We've done $10,000 transactions and we've done $5 billion transactions. So it's a very wide swath of activity that we can organize. As far as our insurance products, I think that is one of the things that's a little bit underselling by Exim Bank, because it has helped a number of U.S. small businesses tremendously, especially in the competitive environment that is not only the global marketplace, but Africa as well. Businesses consistently, when they're purchasing from the U.S., want terms. Who wouldn't? Who wants to tie up their working capital and send cash in advance, cross their fingers, and hope the goods get shipped? Well, our insurance products, which we do thousands of these a year, mostly to small businesses, allow to kind of meet in the middle, where the U.S. business can sell on 90-day, 360-day terms, and then insure it with Exim Bank. Not 100%, we're not here to take all the downside risk. It's about 90 to 95%. And that protects the business, and that helps their cash conversion cycle too, because they can then sell that receivable on to a factory agency or something like that. So I think our insurance products are somewhat of a story that isn't told as much because everyone sees the big transactions, and we actually do a lot of the small transactions.
Well, thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it will be your turn. Now, let me tell you the terms of your turn. We want you to stand up, please, and the people who will pass the microphones around, can you identify yourselves? So we have two on either side. We're going to ask that you state your name and your organization, and that you ask only one question, please. No soliloquies, no diatribes, just one question. We'll have 45 minutes for this process. Thank you very much. And I see the gentleman's hand, if I may.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Congresswoman Passmore for making this happen, not only this event, but everything that you've done to put Africa front and center. My name is Tababu Asafa. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I've lived in the US for the last 30-some years. I'm a proud Ethiopian American. The development of Africa through trade is my passion. And this skill listed 4 elements, and my back bracelet, the giant diaspora that is rising in the US, bringing cultural vitality, growing economy, has capacity, experience, and passion to impact Africa. We are not recognized on the scene. I'm a founder of a small, tiny business called Laced Coffee. Laced Coffee aspires to connect 200,000 small coffee farmers in the coffee growing region to partner with me and do business from the farmer to the distributor. The challenge that I have is the African business growers are partners to me. They have the capacity. In my case, 200,000 small coffee farmers are ready to invest $10 per farmer on my business. That is $2 million or the $4 million that I need to do business on this side. They are my partners. But the challenge is, how do I access that leverage? Okay. Africans have to be given the opportunity to compete. Playing the level field also has to be on this side. Thank you.
Sorry, may I say one thing? I should have made this clear. Please also say to whom you're addressing your question. Are you addressing it to, okay.
Anyone?
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Okay, I think we'll take a few questions at once. So the next person, please, and then we'll come back and answer, of course. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's Sovereign Ambassador Mauritius. First of all, let me join other colleagues in commending Congressman Karen Bass for organizing this meeting this morning, and also for the panelists for the very interesting insight and encouraging insight in the level playing on investment trade between the United States and the Sub-Saharan Africa particularly. Mine is not a question, but rather an observation. We can very well start from our African side to say that Africa was, Africa is, and Africa will continue to be a very good and excellent and consolidated partner with the United States, not only on the question of trade, but also on economy, on investment, on culture and politics, and we can mention all these things. Now, one of the things that have sort of increased that partnership during the past 12 or 15 years is no doubt the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Because other than extractive industry that we are talking about, the African Growth and Opportunity Act has made the difference on the ground for other industry, and we are thankful for the Congress for having passed this important historic legislation in 2000, and particularly the support of Congressman Charles Rangel, Senator Coons, Congressman Karen Bass, and Senator Isaac Son, Chris Smith, and many others, the bipartisan support that we have on this. And I know that I have to be very quick. Now, the African Growth and Opportunity Act is coming to an expiry in 2015, and we, on the African side, we would like this to be reviewed as soon as possible, and if possible in the 130th Congress, so that we can have stability, we have confidence, both from the retailers, manufacturers, and investors point of view. So this is what we will be asking from the African side, that this, you give all the support for the renewals and reauthorization of African growth as soon as possible. I have a question, but I give my other colleagues as far as why the private sector credit is low, but it can be linked with what from trade development we say that we're investing a lot on the infrastructure. And infrastructure is very important because for the African countries which are coming up, they have to build and strengthen the agriculture, the infrastructure and all. And supplemented by the export and import bank, I think we are there, what we will actually say Africa is thriving. Thank you very much.
First off, I'm Melvin Foote with the constituency for Africa here in Washington. I want to congratulate Congresswoman Karen Bass for continuing to do an outstanding job in your leadership on African issues. My question is, the President of the United States is getting ready to go to Africa in about a week. And I'm hearing the panelists, and they're painting a very rosy picture about U.S. interests in Africa, which I don't see match what China's doing, what India is doing, what Brazil is doing, what Japan is doing. What is going to happen during the President's trip to Africa? He's going to Senegal, he's going to Tanzania, going to South Africa. What is going to happen during that trip that's going to transform the landscape for American entrepreneurs in Africa? And either one of the panelists, free to answer. Thank you.
Should we take the last one? She's had her hand up for so long, and then we'll answer some of those questions.
Good morning, Congressman, women leaders, women leaders, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors. My name is Rosemary Segel. I'm the president of the Girls International Group, a small woman-owned business here, and I come from Kenya. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. This is the second time time of the breakfast, and today, the other time we had the advocacy, today we have the money people. What? The problem in Africa with the small business in USA is small and medium business. I focus on small and medium business. I've started a venture capital fund working with small and medium businesses that are so small and medium. So how do we, Mr. Dodd, you've seen me, all of you, most of you have seen me on the event. How do I work with you as USA companies to develop? Because the growth in Africa, in America, all over the world is small and medium businesses. But the problem has been financing. That's why China is taking over Brazil, because the financing is very flexible without strict conditions. They are into business growth. They are not into advocacy. They want to do business and develop Africa. How do we work with you? Through my venture capital fund to support small and medium business. Thank you.
Okay, so shall we start to dig in there? We'll still have some few more minutes for other questions, and I know in the back there, but let's start with some of those. Who wants to jump in first?
I'm happy to jump in first. Let's just get this microphone in again.
Everybody there?
Okay, guess not. I don't want to answer all those questions because I would like to share that with my fellow panelists. Maybe I can just touch on a couple of them though. With respect to the question about African and the role of Africans in our business, I think it's critical to say that because we're focusing on investments into Africa, everything that we do is in partnership with African entrepreneurs. They're always the partners, whether it's diaspora investors or non-diaspora. We have African partners in everything that we do. With respect to the question on China specifically, I want to just pause on that one for a second, because even though on the one hand I'm very confident that the pendulum is swinging and that we no longer see African countries and companies really focusing solely on China, there's really a strong preference for working with American business and diversifying their portfolios to work for the business. Of course, there's a question outstanding as to whether or not they're willing to pay a premium for American business, and that's a question still to be resolved. But with respect to the amount of investment that our governments are making to buy up opportunity and influence in Africa, we're deeply under-investing compared to other countries in the world. I can speak most specifically to OPIC. When you think about how undersized we are, I know Lee Zach will say the same thing with respect to TPA, but when you think about it, we're 220 people serving all of U.S. business. How does that work? And when you look at our competition in other countries, if you look at the G8 alone, even the Dutch equivalent, Holland, of OPIC, the Development Finance Institution of the Netherlands, is twice the size of OPIC. But that doesn't make any sense, of course, because, of course, Holland is small and Connecticut. So when you think about it, we've really traditionally underinvested in the vehicles that help and support and finance our U.S. businesses to play a part in the development of countries throughout the world. Similarly, with respect to instruments, China, comes, as well as all the European development finance institutions, they come with a much larger panoply of instruments that, for example, we have. They come with grants, they come with equity investments, they come with financing, and all kinds of other instruments, whereas we as OPIC have only a financing instrument and an insurance instrument. And yet, as a development agency, we need equity because that's the most developmental instrument you can have, and you need grants. So we haven't got the instruments, we haven't got the resources, and of course we don't have the multi-year reauthorization, which I'm hoping soon will be solved here in Congress, because we're writing on a one-year reauthorization. So if you think about it as a country, even though we're extremely well positioned, as Lee said, we have the best businesses, we have the best innovation, we have the most competitive products and services and innovation, and yet we've deeply underinvested in the instruments and the resources to help our businesses compete abroad. And that actually brings me to the last point I want to make on the AGOA point that was made. That I think one of the challenges that we have, and I'm sure my colleagues from Exim will maybe emphasize this, is that we always have confused development and export promotion. And they're actually two very, very fundamentally different things. As you said, your job is to do exports and job promotion, and as an ancillary benefit, you can do development as well. But our job is to do development, and as an ancillary benefit, we create jobs and exports as well. But we're fundamentally a development agency focusing on development, and you're fundamentally an export agency focusing on exports. And somehow, in the last 40 years, those two jobs have been conflated, but they're really two very different things. And I feel like we haven't had enough of a conversation here in this country about the role of investment from this country into Africa and the benefits that accrue to America from those investments. I don't think we talk anywhere near enough about the fact that 50% of the S&P 500's revenues and income come from their investments abroad. The fact that every job that is created abroad generally creates 2.3 jobs back at home. So that whole notion of the positive benefits of foreign direct investment into very rapidly growing markets when our economy is growing so slowly back at home is critical as an economic boost to our companies. And so that's, I think, needs to be part of the dialogue here. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to take a chance here. I would like to address a couple of the questions that were raised. And again, Elizabeth did a very good job of setting the scene. But I guess one of the things I did want to talk about was something, and Elizabeth and I work very closely together and are very good friends. But one of the things I want to mention is you mentioned that people are going to pay a premium for U.S. I'd like to change that dialogue. It's not a premium for U.S. goods. It is the value of those goods. People are going to get, by buying U.S. goods, over time, they're going to have a better value. It's not a premium, it's true value for those goods. And I think that's one of the things that USTDA, we want to change that. We want to change that dialogue. We want to ensure that people recognize that by buying American, they're going to get the value, they're going to get it over time, and it is the best deal. So that's one of the things that we want to do. With respect to AGOA, I think that was a fabulous question, and especially focusing on the infrastructure. And USTDA has traditionally participated in the AGOA meetings and really focused on the fact that if you're going to have trade, you have to have the infrastructure, especially with respect to transportation. Cost of goods in Africa are higher in part as a result of the cost of transportation. This is truly an area where we all have to focus. I know the agencies have worked together to focus on transportation in particular and energy. And the comment with respect to the president and the president's trip, and as Mike has mentioned, the president really has focused on Africa. The Doing Business in Africa initiative was one that the president has asked our agencies to focus on. And with respect to the upcoming trip, our agencies have also been asked to look very closely with respect to business in the private sector and how we can help and set the scene and get the word out. So I think there's a very strong recognition from the administration that there has to be a link with respect to U.S. business, and the fact that there also has to be a dialogue of business to business in Africa, that that's where the future is. It's not all about government. We can set the scene, we can level the playing field, but ultimately it's business that moves forward. And I think the president will be carrying that message.
Can I just crystallize a remaining question that's still out there about how well we compare in our competition to China? I think a number of people have asked that in different forms. So does anybody want to take that on? We are talking about our competitiveness and how we're leveling the playing field. So the question is, how well do we think we're doing against the competition? So it's not just about China, and there are other countries as well.
Well, let me just take a couple of the questions first, and I'll come back to the China question. But on the small and medium-sized business issue, through the Doing Business in Africa campaign, we're focused on educating all U.S. businesses. But on the counseling front, the small and medium-sized businesses are really the ones that need the most help and support to be able to export to sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the things we're doing is we're going to be launching an Africa Global Business Summit in Chicago in October, where we're going to be bringing ambassadors from the region along with senior commercial officers and economic officers to to talk about the opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa, but also have counseling sessions with companies so they can have a market assessment to determine if there's demand for their product and service in the region. And also, I think we really want to think through how to leverage the diaspora community to help some of these small, medium-sized businesses, because it's an untapped resource, and you all have these relationships, and you all have ideas as to how these small, medium-sized companies can be engaging with the region. On the go, I would just reiterate what Lisa said, but also, Mike Froman had mentioned that we will be pushing for a renewal in AGOA, but this also gives us an opportunity to work with our colleagues on the Hill and think about how AGOA can be improved. It's a great mechanism to advance market-based economics and rule of law, but maybe there's some things we can do to improve upon that. And on the President's trip, I would also reiterate what Lisa said. I think we actually have an opportunity in the President's trip to have the private sector tell their story, to have companies here in the U.S. explain to folks why they're in the sub-Saharan Africa region. I think that's incredibly powerful, and I think we have an opportunity in the next few weeks to really get that story out to the public. And in terms of China, and I think Elizabeth Littlefield talked about this a little bit, I personally think that there's a huge demand for U.S. companies to be in the region. Now, we don't have the boots on the ground that China has, and we don't have a certain mentality that China has when it comes to doing deals. But what we do have is, I think, a great competitive advantage in that we come in, like Black & Veatch and other companies, we train folks on the ground, we are very serious about skills transfer, and when it comes to government procurement, I think we are as competitive as any country in the world. And so I think doing this as an Africa campaign is a way that we can up our game to be able to compete better with some of those countries.
Take a stab at several of the questions as well. First, I kind of wanted to reiterate a little bit of what Elizabeth said. It applies to Exim Bank. We're small. We're 350 people. We have a $100 billion global portfolio. That's a lot of exposure per employee. I'm 50% of the Africa team. We can barely field a tennis doubles team. So we are working also within limited resources too. And that's where leveraging with our partners at Commerce and State and others is very important. But the diaspora community, I think, is important as well, and here's why. Africa still suffers from a branding problem. The perceived risks in Africa are much greater than I think what the actual risks are. And we know this. Zambia issues a bond, it's 11 times oversubscribed. Rwanda issues a bond, it's 5 times oversubscribed, 4 or 5 times oversubscribed. And so I believe there still is a branding problem. And we see that in U.S. exports. The U.S. exports $1.5 trillion worth of goods globally. Most of that goes to Canada and Mexico because they're right next door. But only 22 billion of that 1.5 trillion goes to sub-Saharan Africa. Most of that goes to South Africa, Nigeria, and Angola. And I think it is because, and I talk to U.S. companies, sell to Africa, and they still are a little afraid. And the diaspora community can play a key role in helping rebrand Africa as a place that I think it's preaching to the choir in this room, where we know it's a place to do business, but maybe that doesn't trickle out to the Midwest and other places in the U.S. So I think that is a critical role that the diaspora should play. Now China, 800-pound gorilla. And I always hear China, India, Brazil. And Africa is not a fixed pot. We've heard how it's growing. Their middle class is growing. The demographics are exploding. The population's going to double. My message to U.S. businesses is, get in there. You're not being excluded because China's taking it. I mean, this is a growing pie. And nothing demonstrates success like success is a product of the market. So my message is to get in there. It's a viable place to do business. And I think when you have the demonstrations of your equipment and your products there, they'll speak volumes.
Okay, we do have a time for about 3 or 4 more questions. We're going to go on either side of the room. So the first side over here, Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Ambassador from Nigeria.
Thank you very much. I just finished my ambassador from Nigeria. Ben actually touched on the issue I wanted to speak about, the issue of branding. And let me start by saying that for us, since my colleague from Mauritius has always spoken about Agora, who is very concerned about the African ambassador. I think that leads to the opportunity to speak about the focus of the country. The thing I want to stress is that for us in Nigeria, we are quite, as of now, we are quite satisfied with the level of the role of the U.S. companies in Nigeria, although we still want more. As I'm talking now, Walmart arrived in Nigeria yesterday to put their brand in Nigeria. And then we're just telling another billions of dollars wanted to company in Nigeria to do business. And Mimi, your vice president, led the 17-man trade delegation to Nigeria in March on infrastructure, and we were received, and quite a number of things have come. So we were quite satisfied. The one thing I wanted to stress is that American companies, they did use a great deal when we privatized our telecom industry. That gave us the Europeans and South African companies. They made profit there. The lack of people they never seen in their life, and they made so much profit in this very short time. And the one thing American companies are having told that the opportunity that exists in the power and infrastructure programs are much dozen times, and they're best advice to call. And they're coming. But the point I want to stress is the question of branding is very important. They say the news people say that it's bad news make good copies. When things that are very positive happen in Africa, they get little mention in the media. When an African president comes here, you hardly see any mention of it either in Washington Post or New York Times. But when an African makes a mistake of going there using his ticket to go on an aircraft or on an airline without dodging those people, then it makes news. There's a question of branding. Those who went with us on the trade delegation, when we were leaving, they were asking me, is it in Nigeria we're reading about in the newspapers? Is it in Nigeria they talk as if they kill everybody every day on the streets? This is the question of branding. How we want the U.S. commerce, the brand of commerce, to help us in this. These sometimes affect policy makers. In particular reference to when a Nigerian businessman and African businessman want to come here, they say, oh, that country where there's Al-Qaeda, there's this, there's that. As if when there's a problem in one part, 5% of the country, the whole country is banned. My country has that problem. We have the Boko Haram in only 3 states out of 36 states. Yet, anybody coming from Nigeria is seen as somebody who's a potential terrorist. Yeah. And then when you go to ask for visas, once your name is like that resembles any one of them because you are turned down. So the Department of Commerce help us convey this to Homeland Security and State Department. This negative branding of Africa is impeding trade. There's the point I'm making about our country, you simply cannot beat our market. 170 million people, and over 70% are under 25. A very clear middle class, most of them are ministers, the key ministers who are trained here in the US. Live here, practice here, work here. You don't have any problem with these Chinese. Just for you don't have problem with Chinese. Naturally, African countries, because of factors of history and culture, are more inclined to speak to trade with people whose language they understand, whose culture they understand. The Chinese are there. The only good thing you like about the Chinese president is that he keeps two people on your feet. You know, you have they want to be there. They are not doing well on infrastructure, but now you want to be doing that. That's fine for us. Thank you very much.
All right.
Hi, my name is Malcolm Beach, and I'm with the National Business League. It's a small business association. Recently, I attended a conference in Nairobi, Kenya, sponsored by the U.S. Commercial Service. And the staff did an excellent job in pulling together the conference. However, there was one issue that really bothered me, and that was that it seemed as though the policy of the U.S. government is to support large business. And there is no policy to support African SME businesses. So I found myself at a disadvantage in that I couldn't really have a large pool of fellow of members of the American African diaspora there with me at the conference, nor was there any policy or programs for me to attach to do business in Africa. Kenya and East Africa as a whole, they don't have a small and medium-sized business public policy program. We talk mostly about public-private partnerships with the government, and those are large business opportunities. For small businesses, it didn't seem to be it. And I guess my question to you, Mr. Masterman, is what is the policy of the United States government when it comes to small and medium enterprises, both in the African diaspora and in Africa?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Patricia Hayes Parker. I'm with Parker Associates Global. We are a company engaged in real estate development to permit the development of agribusiness training facilities. My question is to Ms. Littlefield and probably also Ranking Member Representative Bass. I think she's leaving. No, okay. I wanted to make sure that you were staying for the question. My question is that I saw where Ms. Littlefield was addressing some of OPIC's challenges, and those are recognized. In my visit, my company made a presentation to an OPIC officer, and it seems to me that there's something missing that OPIC could be very helpful to SMEs with. And that is, there's often a gap when SMEs are engaged in project development with governments and with their local counterparts. That means that even though the project may meet the guidelines of OPIC as far as being profit-driven, still there's something in that OPIC is not able to bridge a small gap in funding technical and facilitation assistance grants. It seems to me that as the Appropriations Committee is working, that if there could be language that the committee would encourage OPIC to use maximum latitude within the statutory guidance and internal approval processes for support of all food production and agricultural products that it may consider. It seems to me that more is being done maybe on the infrastructure side, less with the agriculture side. Thank you.
Hi again. Good morning. My name is Abunda Okeo. I'm a writer. I work primarily with the Women's Media Center. And my question is specifically to Ms. Sack and Mr. Masterman. I'm curious about your opinion of the bill that was introduced last fall and still being debated about the removal or the ending of the diversity visas that primarily service Africans who are coming to the United States, who do not necessarily have very high degrees, but are able to come to this country and actually develop their careers and their families and their communities abroad and in the United States. And I'm curious about what you think that message brings to Africans about the U.S.'s policy or stance in terms of investing in African people as well as African nations.
Hi, Delron Howard with General Electric. First, I want to compliment Congresswoman Bass for this series of breakfasts. It's really great to have a chance to talk about Africa with such a great audience. And thanks to all of the panelists. Many of these panelists are really partners for GE in Africa, where over the last several years we've now created several thousand jobs and increased our revenues to $7 billion in sub-Saharan Africa, thanks in part to many of the partners at the table. I just wanted to pose a couple of questions and give you a kind of a big company's perspective on this. We know that Africa is incredibly important, and Lee Zack hit the nail on the head in terms of the U.S. value proposition. It's life cycle cost, it's corporate social responsibility, it's ethics, it's transparency, it's training, it's capacity building. That's what U.S. companies bring to Africa, and that's what differentiates us from China. And I think to the extent we can have a whole of government messaging about the U.S. value proposition, I think that's the best way to go about this. My other comment in terms of the SMEs, please know that when a company like GE or Boeing exports to Africa, we are bringing thousands and thousands of small, medium-sized enterprises along with us. Our suppliers are small, medium-sized enterprises. So there are a number of SMEs who are exporting to Africa through big companies. Given that we are here on the Hill, many of these agencies have talked about how small they are and how underfunded they are, and we totally agree. But you are also tied down with a number of policy constraints, which I think would be helpful for people to understand. EXIM has a U.S. bond and bulk requirement that often vitiates the benefit of EXIM financing. You have an economic impact test, which I understand is triggered by the value of a Ford F-150. OPIC, unfortunately, has a carbon cap, which limits their ability to fund all of the gas-fired power projects we see in Africa. Mozambique, Tanzania, Ghana are sitting on mountains of gas, and OPEC can't finance those projects. So I think it would be helpful to understand some of the policy constraints and what Congress can do to help us do more in Africa.
Hi, my name is Julia Wilson, and I'm CEO and founder of Wilson Global Communications. And I'd like to applaud Congresswoman Bass for this opportunity and Dr. Freeman for their moderation. We are a public affairs company doing business in Africa for 19 years, and have been doing business in China just recently. But most importantly, throughout the years, we've talked about a positive image campaign for Africa. We tapped a little bit on branding this morning. I've heard some encouraging remarks from an ambassador from Nigeria, and I was just in Nigeria a week ago. One of the major, I think, constraints for investors and for small businesses is that they really don't understand Africa. They don't understand the growth and the opportunities. They're not educated or informed in a way that they understand. Mr. Todd said that the diaspora should educate throughout the country. Well, I think the diaspora needs support from the government and from Americans. Americans have to talk about their positive experiences in Africa. So it has to be a partnership between the African diaspora, the government, and American businesses who have positive experiences there. We need to promote Africa in a positive way and balance out some of the negative images and negative news that we see continually about Africa. So I just have to ask, this is from Mike Masselman, is there a strategic plan, a strategic communications plan to educate, inform, and update the American public and specifically American small businesses and medium-sized businesses on Africa?
Okay, we'll let the panelists respond now. Thank you.
So, thank you for all those excellent observations and questions. I have to say, I completely agree with the whole question about branding. As I've been hearing it and living it for the better part of 35 years, I'm reminded that in the village in Africa in which I lived for a year or so, when I first got there, actually when I came back to visit 10 years later, everyone in the village was convinced that everybody in America had a gun under their tail. Because they'd been watching Dallas or something, and that was their main source of information about the U.S. So they too have their own visions of us that are different from the typical American view of Africa. A number of questions were raised about small business and about educating small businesses in the U.S. And I just wanted to mention that, I think we as the interagency group here that focuses on Africa and on promoting small business and on exports and on investment, work very hard to coordinate together to make sure that small businesses are aware of the opportunities available. OPIC runs a program called Expanding Horizons throughout the country, which are workshops focused on small businesses, and in particular, many of them are focused on minority and women-owned businesses, to which we invite our interagency colleagues to really sit down with small businesses throughout the country and explain to them how they can use U.S. government services to support their investments and their exports abroad. So if you're looking for the schedule of those workshops, take a look at www.opic.gov and you'll see the schedule of those workshops. There may well be one in your region coming soon. With respect to grants, I fully agree that many small businesses and any businesses on the highly developmental end of the spectrum oftentimes need grants for early startup and technical assistance. Unfortunately, we don't have the facility to do either grants or to do equity investments. And normally, we've actually coordinated that kind of work with our colleagues at AID. We do, of course, specialize in that their main businesses is providing grants, but it is a frustration and one that causes us issues all the time, particularly in Africa. To address this, in part, we've been working closely with the State Department and developed facilities focused on clean energy in Africa, called the Africa Clean Energy Finance. And this is a small facility, but one that we hope will grow, that provides money for project preparation and technical assistance, organized either through TPA or directly, to focus on that support to small businesses that need a little bit of support to get their projects up and running. So this may be money for, a land survey or an environmental assessment or other things that need grant money in order for that project to get off the ground. So this is something we're working on together with TPA and the State Department, and hopefully will have a real impact. With respect to agriculture, this has been traditionally an area that's been more difficult to fund from a commercial perspective over the years, and we've not had as much success in funding agriculture, particularly farm agriculture. The infrastructure around agriculture, whether it's cold storage or transportation or ports, has been more of a focus. But we've been working more on this in the last couple of years with a focus on Africa, and are proud to say that our portfolio has grown from some 10 million to almost $500 million in the agriculture sector alone. It's difficult because we haven't yet seen if it's going to work, but this is an area that we're making more and more effort in. So I would just say that we're all working together in order to find ways to reach out to small businesses here. And I think both Exim and ourselves are quite proud of the fact that we've increased significantly the amount of support. And more less tangible support like workshops and technical assistance training that we've been providing over the last year or two.
Okay, now we just have about 3 more minutes. I know some specific questions were asked because we have to wrap up as well. So we just have 3 more minutes. I know Mike has a specific question was addressed to you and maybe a couple others, and then we have to wrap up.
Let me just taking a step back on the National Export Initiative, on the SME front. Remember that in the U.S. only 1% of companies are exporting, and part of what we're trying to do through the National Export Initiative is educate our small and medium-sized businesses on the 95% of consumers that live outside our borders, many of whom live in sub-Saharan Africa. And while we're very much focused on large businesses as well, SMEs are actually 98% of our exporters and 34% actually by dollar value. So when we think about many of the services that we have in government, they're actually there specifically to help SMEs. And when I think about our commercial service, both domestically and the folks abroad, they're the ones who are really counseling our small businesses on the market opportunities and linking them with these vetted buyers. On the branding question, and I'd love to get your suggestions, because we're in the process of developing a strategic communications plan, but it's not just about us in government having all the relevant talking points, it's about partnering with the private sector. And what we're developing is a list of what we're calling DBIA champions. These are companies here in the U.S., large, small, medium companies, not just those who have worked with all of our agencies, but those who have made decisions to invest and trade in the region. And we need to make sure that we're helping to get those stories out. We know that there's been events on sub-Saharan Africa for many, many years, and what we're trying to do with DBIA is leverage those events and make sure that companies are able to help tell their stories in a framework so that people know in the U.S. or businesses know they don't have to go it alone, that they have strong government partners, that we've got their back, and that by trading and investing, we're going to help advance security and democracy and development and create these robust economic infrastructures so that there will be more trading and investing opportunities for all businesses in the U.S., including small and medium-sized businesses.
Actually, the ambassador from Ethiopia wants to say one last thing, and that really has to be it. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm the ambassador of Ethiopia, and I would like to thank you for the excellent leadership you have given us. And I have only one thing to raise, and I do see the importance of all your institutions in supporting private sector in Africa. But you have to see that these similar institutions have been supporting companies in Europe, the American companies, they are successful. And you have been supporting companies in Asia, they are equally successful. And why are they not working the same in Africa? Should be looked at differently. And Africa should be supported to be globally competitive. If Africa had been supported to be globally competitive, for sure the small support your companies, USTDA, OPIC, Exim Bank, have been given so far would affect them to be competitive. So Africa is in a situation where lacks right type of infrastructure. In where Africa is not interconnected. And I would like to come back to exactly to the comment the Mauritian ambassador has said, that our type of institutions should support Africa to be globally competitive. And if Africa is globally competitive, US companies will be competitive.
So, I'll just say, give you a sense of some of the I actually can't read this, sorry. Can't read your writing. Go ahead, say it.
One gentleman here, I vote Jim.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry, one more before.
My name is Bob Wells. I'm the president and CEO of Wells Company, veterans-owned small business. I'm also the special advisor for national security for Africa Affairs for Vice President Chin. My question is for Katie as well as for Mike with regard to looking at if maritime security is also in your energy portfolio and also the agribusiness portfolio. Africa is more than just the terrestrial continent itself. It includes their exclusive economic zones and looking at their safe ports and their actual trade capacity in order to trade through all the different ports. Is there room for the maritime sector?
Just really quickly answer that.
Yes.
Okay, well, I didn't see anyone's email address on this, so perhaps as a concluding remark in the end, you can tell everybody how to contact you. So just before we close out, let me just recap on some of the messages that we heard today. First, I think the important thing is the answer to the question of U.S. competitiveness and leveling the playing field. We are trying. And we have a number of tools, some of the agencies that are part of the trade promotion coordinating agencies. If there are 20 or 19 federal government agencies involved in trade promotion that have been presented here today. They've told you about some of their successes. They have many more that there's no time to talk about, but hopefully you can engage directly with them. We've heard a bit about the constraints. They all have administrative budget constraints as well as programming constraints and reauthorization related constraints. And that's why we're here today in Congress, because that's how we get that solved through the partnership with Congress. There are some unmet demand, as we've heard, about some of the smallest of the SMEs that are represented here. And there needs to be more outreach to that group. We have heard today that we have some very good products and services from the U.S. that are in fact in demand in Africa, and so in that regard, we are competing favorably. We are benefiting from AGOA, and one of the ways that we take advantage of that is through our diaspora, but an interesting question was raised as well about the diversity of uses and how that might impact outreach to the diaspora. We have heard a number of comments about the importance of whole government messaging about the need to focus on Africa, because after all, Africa is one of our large trading partners and growing. We import a lot as well as export a lot. And as Africa grows, we can definitely export more to Africa. So we also have an interest in promoting Africa's development. Promoting small and large business linkages are important. I think the gentleman from General Electric underscored that, as well as Mike mentioned Black and Beach, for instance. There are constraints on our funding. We do have terms, and we've also heard some questions about that. We can't focus some of the agencies on investments, carbon emitting. There's a requirement for a percentage of U.S. Made in some of the funding that we get. And there, importantly, a number of people mentioned the importance of promoting education and branding, helping to brand Africa in a more important way. And lastly, I would say, before I turn it over to the senior ranking representative, is that Congress has an important role to play in each one of these issues that were raised today, and that's why we're here. So, in conclusion, what we need to happen is to continue this dialogue, and we encourage you, Representative Bass, to please continue in this process, because it's providing an important opportunity for us to get together as private and public representatives. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank once again all of our panelists, and in particular our moderator, for all of the information and the dialogue today. So we want to give them another round of applause. I also want to thank the representatives from the diplomatic corps, the ambassadors who are here and who I've gotten to know very well, and we work very closely, because one thing that I think everybody is committed to here, and that's making sure that we have a GOA reauthorized, that we have it reauthorized soon, and that's part of the whole point of this, is as we move forward in trying to do that well before 2015, it's really going to take all of our involvement to make sure that that happens. So your participation today and your ongoing participation will be key to that process. And I wanted to take the opportunity to, actually before I announce the next breakfast, the mention of the diversity visas, the young woman that raised that, I just wanted to add a couple of words, because you should know that that's a big issue within the Congressional Black Caucus, and the caucus is definitely taking that up. One of the things that we're trying to be very careful about, which is why you haven't seen us be a lot more vocal about it, is that, you know, immigration is a hot button issue, and we don't want anything to divide us, because we know that comprehensive immigration reform is something that is long overdue. But the issue of diversity visas is very, very important. So we're definitely going to stay on that and not let anything happen to that. Or if it is changed, that we don't have the impact of reducing the number of votes from the continent and the Caribbean that can come into this country. With that, I want to make sure that everyone received this card. This card is announcing the next breakfast, which will be on August 1st, same place, same time. And the focus of that is going to be about AGOA, because that breakfast will take place on August 1st. We will be right just 2 weeks before the AGOA conference, and we'll be a couple of weeks or a month or so after the president's visit. So we thought we would take up two topics at that time, talking about the AGOA conference, but also hearing what happened on the president's trip. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time out this morning. We're going to continue this, so thank you very much.